Mes ginsimės iki paskutinės minutės. Mes ginsim savo radiją ir televiziją.
Ta naktį buvo paleisti 7 šūviai į Lietuvos laisvę ir nepriklausomybę.
40 dienų paieškų pagaliau surasta dingusi Vajagų šeima.
2 million residents of the Baltic states linked hands to protest not only what happened 50 years ago, but to send a message of defiance.
Deep in Lithuania, in the quiet, unnoticed Kaunas gardening community, 30-year-old Alvydas Matakas was constantly busy, working on a small brick house that his grandfather has gifted him. On the evening of November 25th, the man suddenly disappeared. His wife, waiting for him to return, contacted the police the following day. Alvydas was with someone he knew, enjoying themselves, drinking and talking about their wives and simple village problems. When Alvydas started feeling tired, he decided it was time to go home. As he walked out the door, he was very close to his own house. When feeling his pockets, he realized that 2,000 litas were missing. After checking, he suspected that his drinking buddy stole the money. He returned and demanded to give it back. But his drinking companion insisted that he hadn't taken it. Both men were heavily intoxicated and the argument moved outside. Although Alvydas was prepared for the worst, thinking he would just fight this man standing before him, maybe get into a scuffle, what he didn't know was that in a few seconds, this man would slit his throat, taking his life almost instantly. Alvydas was killed by a busy village road, near the turn into a gardening community, very close to his home. But what the killer did next, how he desecrated Alvydas' body, horrified investigators for a long time. The authorities quickly discovered that on that fateful evening, Matakas had visited his peer, Aurimas Jočys, who lived just a few houses down the street, near the victim's home. Police investigators found that a year prior, Jočys had moved to Šakių village with his wife and 2 young children from Vilnius. Before that, he had been convicted twice for theft but avoided prison. The first time, the court sentenced him to probation, and the second time, he received community service. The last time he was caught was at a Senukai store, when he attempted to steal a set of wrenches, a few small tools, and an axe. During initial interrogation, investigators realized that his seemingly quiet, unremarkable man who worked at an auto repair shop might be hiding a terrible secret. The man didn't deny that his neighbor, who later disappeared without a trace, had visited him. However, he presented a completely illogical version of events. He said that both he and his neighbor had drunk alcohol together, and then, that night, his neighbor left to repair a car, said investigator to Lietuvos Rytas. The suspicion grew stronger as Jočys' wife told a completely different story. Experienced detectives immediately understood that the woman, who was behaving strangely and contradicting herself in her testimony, was hiding something. A few days after the murder, Jočys was arrested. Important evidence was found in his home. Clothes with the victim's blood and blood stains were also discovered in his car. Soon after interrogation, Jočys confessed to killing his neighbor, Alvydas Matakas. He explained that after a violent fight with his neighbor, he dismembered the body and hid it in a remote location. After getting his throat cut, blood pouring from his wounds, the victim collapsed to the ground. The killer dragged him aside, but realizing that the body would be discovered if left there longer, he decided to hide it. He returned with his Volkswagen Transporter minibus, loaded the body, and took it to the abandoned fox farm about 5 kilometers away. There, he dismembered the body, cutting off the head, arms, and legs. The body parts were thrown over a high fence into the surrounding area. The killer then used chemicals he brought with him to pour over the victim's face and fingers to destroy fingerprints. Then, he threw the body parts into a deep hole. On the way back, he stopped by the nearest riverbank and threw the victim's gas pistol into the water. Although divers searched for the weapon, they never found it. At the start of the investigation, trying to mislead the authorities, Jočys refused to reveal where he had hidden the victim's body. It was only 4 days after the murder that the body was found, buried in an abandoned fox farm. Upon exhuming the body, the investigators were stunned by what they saw. The victim's head, arms, and legs were severed, and the face and hands were eaten away by chemicals, probably sulfuric acid. This was the killer's attempt to ensure that even if the body was found, the victim's identity could not be determined. The investigators managed to find a knife that was used to kill Alvydas Matakas. The killer had hidden the weapon in the stove, so officers had to carefully sift through the ashes. The most significant evidence was that Aurimas took the minibus to the chemical cleaning service. Employees, noticing the red stains on the seats, informed the police. When the case finally went to trial, the courtroom was filled with tension. 31-year-old Jočys was accused not only of murder but also of desecrating the victim's body. Yet, as the trial unfolded, Jočys' defense was as perplexing as the crime itself. He claimed he couldn't remember key details. He denied acting out of selfish motives and insisted that the murder was accidental, a tragic result of a drunken brawl. But the prosecution painted a different picture. They argued that Jočys had meticulously planned the crime, even purchasing items like hydrochloric acid and plastic wraps to cover his tracks. And then there were the chilling details: how he allegedly dismembered the body, used acid, and attempted to conceal the evidence. It seemed as if Jočys had turned the fox farm into his personal graveyard. Jočys' wife, Jekaterina Jočienė, added another layer of mystery to the case. She claimed that her husband confessed to the murder the very night it happened, returning home covered in blood. However, she waited until the arrest to come forward, fearing for her own safety. She also revealed disturbing facts about Jočys' past, how he had a history of cruelty to animals even as a child. 2 cats and a pet snake had mysteriously disappeared from their home just before the murder. Was this a glimpse into the mind of a killer? A man who had learned to hide his darkness behind a mask of normalcy? Or was there more to this story than meets the eye? As the trial continued, Jočys' defense team fought to cast doubt on the prosecution's case. They argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that Jočys had no clear motive, and that the murder was a tragic accident. But the prosecution was relentless, portraying Jočys as a cold, calculating killer who would stop at nothing to cover his tracks. And then there were the missing 2,000 litas, the money Jočys allegedly stole from the victims, money that could prove this was a crime of greed, not passion. But Jočys denied taking it, claiming he had burned the blood-stained banknotes in a desperate attempt to hide the evidence. The court decided to find Jočys guilty of theft. However, it ruled that he had not killed the victim with the intent to steal the money, so he couldn't be convinced of a murder out of selfish motives. Jočys claimed he killed his neighbor because the latter had touched his young daughter and given her his pistol. The Kaunas District Court sentenced Jočys to 12 years in prison for murder, the theft of 2,000 litas, and desecrating the corpse. Additionally, he was ordered to pay around 27,000 euros in non-material damages to the 30-year-old widow of the victim, Marija Matakaitė. The crime was extremely cruel, so the sentence is clearly too lenient. Such a person should have been sentenced to at least 20 years. I was close to the crime scene. I could have been the victim myself, said the victim's grandfather, Alvydas Matakas. He also plans to inform the foreign press about the murder and the court verdict. The victim was only 30, and the conflict was just over 2,000 litas. Was a human life worth that little? But several factors show anger, planning, and inhuman relentless toward his neighbor. Could Alvydas have always spent time with a monster, enjoying his company, never suspecting that Aurimas was planning to take him from his wife and loved ones? Thank you for watching this video. As always, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this case. What do you think caused such cruelty? And if you have any other events you want me to cover, don't hesitate and leave a comment. Stay safe, stay alert, and see you next time.